broadcast on YouTube wants to go through and do things like show the PowerPoint, I have to go through a program to produce it. It's called OBS and do a bunch of stuff with it. Works pretty well, but it's kind of a pain. But it gives, once I figure out how to do it, then it works well. On that happy note, yes, somebody clicked. So on that happy note, this is what I want you to do. So yesterday, I broadcast on YouTube. You got to watch me be uncomfortable. It was very awkward. I got to figure out how I want to do it. You know, last April when I did it at home, you know, I had it kind of set up, and here I thought I just kind of like be in front of the class. It was very weird. It was very, very weird. I got to figure out something new, but hopefully it worked for you. And I am collecting that because I know it's tough. It's a lot harder doing that. So I want to reward you for that hard work, but also I'm going to start quizzing on that. And in fact, this is the perfect time to do it. What I want you to do is, everybody take out your notes for that day. Take it out. You can have those notes from yesterday out.
Wait, there was a video yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah, I've said it like 5 times. Well, and then on Teams, I posted in big letters. There's a video broadcasting on YouTube.
Subscribe, dude.
Did you check?
Get the cloud.
The answer's no, right?
Oh,
Yeah, I put that for
for
Teams shot.
fiber center, we didn't need to get a loan. We need a lot of stuff.
Talk about that. Yeah.
We need
I have an assignment on it.
um,
So the assignment should have posted yesterday.
yeah, I wear.
All I saw on Teams was
I think small pirates are more in this like reverse
the
model.
assignment for the first trade.
Instead of iPad, so it's just like a black symbol.
And that was notes from yesterday.
And then
Because you know, the date was 9/16. That was yesterday.
Oh, so we're talking about the fur trade notes?
Swords?
Or
Yeah, from what I broadcast
Or you get
yesterday.
like normal swords. It's like whatever you're into.
So it's on YouTube. It's on my YouTube
Or like
channel.
pirates use knives.
The same place I did it on this week on Monday and Tuesday. No, I'm just gonna do a quick little
I
quiz.
feel like it'd be easier to like
Watch it, turn in the notes, okay?
like on pirates too.
All right, well, you still taking the quiz. Everybody, half sheet of paper. Half sheet of paper. You can have your notes out for what I did yesterday. You can have those out. Half sheet. I do quizzes on half sheets. Why half sheets? Because it's only a few questions. You're only going to write a 1 or 2 word answer. And you can share. It saves paper. Or you can save the sheet for the next quiz. Because we're going to be here until May. Probably with masks on. So, let's do the quiz. While you do that, I got the sweet mask. I hate the paper. The other one is just not quite big enough.
Camera mouse here to 185 for each of them. It's a lot less than I want to do. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so quiz doesn't have to be basic. I'm rewarding you for watching those because I think that's significantly harder. It's so much easier in class for all of us to do. But this is my way to reward you. And so, to give you an example of what we're going to start doing, I'm really trying to come up with ways to reward you, and I guess I'd give you cookies or something, but I don't know how that's going to work. So I thought, well, I'll give you quizzes that you can use your notes. Little quizzes, make them worth a few points. And this is the kind of quiz I'm going to do. So, these are all from yesterday's notes. Very basic quiz. And so, next Thursday, I will do this again for Monday and Tuesday class. Does that make sense? For the 8A? You can have the notes out. It should be very easy. And I can tell the people who did not watch it, that's your responsibility. You don't have the notes. No. Same thing. I know you missed it. You still have a chance to turn it in. But this is what we're going to be doing. And I repeat, I really understand this is hard to do. And I'm trying to come up with ways. Would you rather have cookies? How about both? Maybe we'll have a cookie day. I'll have to soak them in something, but I'll soak them in rubbing alcohol. But, number one. So after all those wars for empire, what was the name for the treaties that did nothing to change the borders? I gave you a name for it. It left the what? Something before the war. I gave you the name. That's what they call those treaties. That's a pretty good diorama. We should have a diorama building day. Number 2. So, 1737, or 1739, I'm sorry, there'd be a commercial war. So basically a trading war with Spain. What was that called? It involved a part of the body that looks vaguely like gray cauliflower. It's really attractive. Number 3, what was the valley that everybody wanted that's going to lead to war? What is the valley? Britain wanted it, France wanted it, all the colonies wanted it, and of course the people who lived there had an interest in keeping it too. Number 4, and I'll go back if you missed one. Number 4, what colony would try to get there first and they sent their militia? What colony would try to get there first and they sent their militia so they could lay their claim to this colony? That was in 1754. Well, 1753 they sent the first expedition. And last, but I would argue least. I'm not following. What type of governments did imperial countries want to establish in the areas they would dominate? So I mean colonial imperialism or economic imperialism. What kind of governments did they want to establish? What type of governments? So they could get what they wanted. What type of governments? Empires always want this type of governments. Would you like a bonus question?
Not really.
What English queen would be pregnant 17 times to try to get an heir? This poor woman. 17 times. While the war was going on with Spain and France. Sorry. Any repeats? Raise your hand. Yes.
Question 1.
What was the name for a treaty that would not change the borders at all? So basically, like they fought for nothing. You'd be shocked how many times that happens. Gone through all that hell, blood and treasure for nothing. We appear to be going. Okay. Yes.
Number 5, please.
Number 5. What type of government did imperial powers want? I'm checking to make sure this is streaming okay. Any other questions? Okay, now I am going to collect this, but I'm not going to worry so much about the points for this one. But now I'll give you points, but it'll be a reward. I think it's actually a pretty good way to do it, all things considered. Here's me saying, check and see if it's streaming. Okay. So just raise your own. Number 1. Did anyone get that? What was the name for the no change of borders? Yes.
Status quo treaties.
Yeah. Status quo. Sometimes status quo antebellum, which just means before the war. Yeah. Just status quo. That's all it is. Number 2. What was the war with Spain? Ear related? Yeah.
War of Jenkins' ear.
Jenkins' ear. And the idea of them handing this ear around. Look at this ear. Kind of weird. Number 3. What valley?
Ohio River.
Yeah, the Ohio River Valley. Number 4, who would send the militia? Which colony? Yeah, go ahead.
Virginia.
Yeah, Virginia colony. It was a race. And what kind of government?
Economic imperialism.
Yeah, it's economic imperialism. What type of government though? Yeah.
Is it big stick democracy?
Well, that's what the U.S. would call, not democracy, diplomacy.
Diplomacy still.
Dictatorships.
Oh, I got that method.
Yeah, they want a dictatorship. Or something with no democracy. They want it, so it could be like in India, the British and the French and the Portuguese would prop up monarchs. We'll give you money, you do everything we want, make sure the money flows. So they'll pick a tiny little group to help get rich while they suck the rest of the wealth out of the country. Oh, bonus? Who got that? Yeah, go ahead.
Queen Anne
Yeah.
the First.
Yeah, Queen, as I was gonna say, Queen Anne. That poor woman. There's just a movie about her a little bit that won the Academy Award called something. Oh my goodness, it was just in my head. It won the Academy Award, and it's a wild movie, and it's rated R, so you must get parental approval before you watch it, because we are in a high school, so I have to add that. The Favorite. Okay.
Oh,
So-
Emma Stone.
Huh?
Oh, it's just Emma Stone plays as the queen. Never mind. It's the actress.
Oh, who is it again?
Emma Stone. Is
No,
that the
she
one?
was in it, but she didn't win the Academy Award. It's wild, but it's pretty interesting. Poor Queen Anne would keep a rabbit for every child that didn't make it. So she had 17 rabbits and kind of treated them as her children.
None of them made it?
None of her, she had 17 times. And how she survived that is beyond my ability to
How do
comprehend.
you lose 17 kids?
Mm-hmm.
How does
This
this
is Middle Ages.
Sure. A third of all children died of childbirth out there. A third of all women died of childbirth.
They give you a bottle of whiskey and just lay you on the table.
It was pretty awful. Okay, I'm going to collect this. Who got 4 better? Raise your hand. 4 better. All right, nice job. I will take it. Give me. I'm making a collage for all of you.
Just a bonus.
Yeah, so you get 5. Good job. I want yours even though you didn't do well. I want to know why.
Yeah, like, I swear those questions were that math. And like, I took
You wrote the answers after the fact, right?
Yeah, I got one.
I mean,
I'm not worried about
I'm
that.
not supposed to.
No, it's fine. I'm just asking you.
I got Queen Anne.
All right. So, as you know, on Wednesday you have class. I try to make it so on YouTube you can watch it on your leisure, even though the problem is you can't ask questions. But just the way we got to do it. And for those who watched it, the broadcast, even though I was a little bit, it really was just weird. I didn't think it'd be that as weird as it was. I started going like, God, I'm just like the emptiness. We need cardboard cutouts of everybody. Like a football game. The Broncos had it all over the cardboard cutouts. They just looked very weird. And it echoed, but at least I didn't have to wear a mask. So I sounded only slightly muffled. They get that nose covered. I know, it's a pain. It slips down. Did it sound okay though? Did it work okay for everybody? Were you excited?
Yes.
It seems that most people watch it. If you didn't, I am collecting those notes. So just take a picture, make a PDF, send it in. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up where we started. We got literally right to the beginning of the French and Indian War. We got to finish the French and Indian War because we have to start everything I got to talk about. I got to give you one exciting story, and I'm looking for a volunteer. Needs fairly long hair so I can get a hold of it, but it's for the podcast. It's all for the kids. It's all for charity.
I got a mullet.
All right, give me a sec. You got a problem.
Good, where'd you do?
Oh, I put grades in. I'm starting to change things. If I don't have it to a 0, you're gonna watch me look for something. Isn't that exciting?
Very.
What's even better than people watching it. This is good TV.
Right after school, 3:30 to 10. So if you want to pick up Travis.
Dummies. That's me.
Yeah, I work 30 hours a week right now. I was working 40.
That's 2.
Yeah, but now I'm working.
so weird. Okay, so
But yeah.
one thing about YouTube. So I do broadcast. I broadcast third period. I do it on Wednesdays, and my webpage there. It's Jay Partridge's YouTube page, you know. And if you and you get notifications if you want and all that. But that's what I'm going to do for that class. The only thing I won't broadcast on YouTube is when I show a video, because of copyright issues. YouTube doesn't like that. I found that out the hard way last April. Literally cut me off in the middle. And special topics. So with that, we got right to, who did Virginia send?
George Washington.
Yeah, George Washington. And George Washington, he was the second son. Didn't have a lot of money. What kind of education did George Washington have? I mentioned this at the very end yesterday. A classical education, man, you're going to learn Latin, might learn Greek. The language that everybody wanted to learn for Europe, especially at that time, was French. Gentlemen knew French, no matter where you were. And the classics and poetry and art. But you need a tutor. His parents couldn't afford that. So he had a very practical education. He knew how to survey, knew the math, but wasn't a gentleman. But what was his whole goal in life? He wanted to become rich, wanted to become a gentleman, and wanted to become a British officer. I mentioned this at the end of class, just at the very end yesterday. That's all he wanted. All he wanted. Okay, that's a lot. He really wanted to be rich. There's going to be stories about Washington, myths about him that are going to come out 30 or 40 years after he died. You know, like he didn't tell a lie and threw a silver dollar over the Potomac. That's one I always remember. And that's a long way. It's a mile-wide river. There were no silver dollars yet. But anyways, that's irrelevant, right? It's all a myth. No, Washington was a human. He had these ambitions. And so he jumped at the chance. This is actually him right before the Revolutionary War. Jumped at the chance to lead the militia to try to claim Fort Duquesne. And he would have approximately 160 militiamen, not very well trained. These are citizens and also part-time soldiers, have a little bit of drilling. They, except for Washington, who had a nice uniform, because he wanted to look the part. Major, then go up to lieutenant colonel. They had uniforms. And then they were able to convince about 200 Mingos, which were a tribe that had been warring with the Powhatans, to join them, promising you're going to get money, booty. You're going to get stuff out of it. And so they took off from Williamsburg. Almost forgot, Washington went there the summer before. He went there on an expedition with just a few men, and he found out that the French were already at the mouth of the start of the Ohio River. The Allegheny and the Monongahela River run together, and that forms the Ohio River. The French were there. So that's why they're going to bring more men. But the thought was, if we could still get there, push aside the few French that are there and build a fort, then we can get a claim. And it's not a British claim. They wanted it to claim for Virginia. So that colony can spread out there. They didn't want England to come in there and make another colony. They wanted it for themselves. These are planters. And men like Washington, who didn't have a lot of money, they wanted to get that land cheap. And he's a surveyor. Won't that help? Get that land cheap, keep the best ones, keep the best acres, but then sell the rest and make money. What do you call it when you buy something cheap and hope to make a profit by selling it when the price goes up? What is that called? I told you yesterday.
Capitalism.
Capitalism has an element of that, but capitalism is also the building of products. So, speculation. Thank you. Speculation. And speculation is the big money. I should add that speculation is the basis of our economy. And right now, and only people who have a lot of money can speculate. You're not going to go buy a bunch of real estate if you don't have enough money to survive. Unless you're crazy. But that's another story for down the road. And so you want to get there first. So they're bringing this men. And they're just going to march to where the French were. And the French are going to build what's called Fort Duquesne. They didn't know the fort was there yet. I want you to ponder these people for a second. Just think about it. They're here, and they're going to walk up to well, actually they took boats up to Alexandria, and then they're going to go over the mountains. There's no road. Now, to our point of view, the Appalachian Mountains, when it's 4,000 to 6,000 feet at its peak, at the divide, doesn't seem that high. But when you go from sea level up, that's really high, and there's no roads. And if you've been to the Appalachian Mountains, it's not like peaks and like outcroppings of mountains. They're like long lines of mountains. These long peaks that go for literally miles. I mean, like this, lines. There's a stream everywhere, heavily forested, because it rains 3 or 4 times more than here. It's really pretty. If you like forests and running water, it's like some of the most beautiful areas I've ever seen. But can you imagine walking over that with supplies? They had to cut a road about this wide that cut through the trees. 2 men abreast or a pack animal. And they just took off. But also think about what kind of people these were. I mean, today, can you imagine I'm going to walk 800 miles and cut a road? You're told to do that. What would your response be? What was their response? What do we got to do? And they just did it. They just took off. I mean, who ever whines if they have to cross the street? Or some of you are like, oh, that's what I do every day. Or I'm 20 minutes late for lunch. Ah! No, they just took off. I mean, when you remember people here, how just tough they were, and how creative, how much ingenuity they have. I mean, they're just of a different breed almost. I mean, this is a tougher generation. This is my generation. That's them, mine. That's what I had to do. Every day, go 10 to 15 miles uphill, both ways, through frozen, gator-infested swamps to get to my school in Miles City. Every day, frozen gators. But with that, no, it's amazing. I'm always in awe of these people. But they took off, and as they got closer and closer, first off, they realized that the French allies and Hurons were watching them all the way. And secondly, when they got there, there's a fort. They had built a wooden stockade, and then they had bounded dirt and wood to make ramparts around it. Now, this is when the British have improved it, so this is a diorama that's actually there. But there's a fort. There's no way these few hundred men with no heavy weapons can take the fort. And they have no idea how many French are in there. No idea. But it's a pretty big fort. This map right here, it's this part of the Baltic. No, it's Lake Erie. Here's the Allegheny and the Monongahela, and then that's where the fort was. This is the map Washington made. It's a darn good map if you think about it. Think about the tools Washington had at that time. So when they got there, Washington was just crestfallen. All my dreams are done. What does he do? Well, he goes back to a clearing and waits. And a small French unit would be sent out, probably to go talk to Washington about, say, hey, we're here, leave. This is French. And this would become known as the Jumonville Affair. The Marquis de, there's about 45 different names for this royal family, but there's a lieutenant, young lieutenant named Jumonville. And now it's called Jumonville Glen. They were coming out, just a few French soldiers and a few of their Huron allies, and it was a dual mission. To go tell Washington, go back home. And also, it looked like they were going to keep going and eventually go up to the Great Lakes, then up to Quebec, to tell New France, hey, we might need more men. But when they got there, this is a picture of it, and you can see how rocky it is there. This is 9 years ago, but really, it's rough, rugged area. The mountains are a couple million years older than the Rockies, and you can really tell it just has eroded so much more. That's where you get these kind of long lines. I got a mental, I think it's beautiful. Oh, this is a watercolor on wood of Washington from the 1770s. I just thought it was a good picture. So Washington didn't know what to do, so he made the decision on his own. He's on his own in 1754 to ambush the French Canadians, or this is how you would write French Canadians. See, it's Canadians, not Canadians. I was trying to say it with the E or the A, and it doesn't work. So, yeah. My point is not just French Canadians. They ambushed them. No, he just did it. They're not at war. He just attacked. There'll be a few men killed, a few men wounded, including Jumonville. And then it gets murky after this. But Jumonville's killed, and by the way, that's a casualty. Casualty is someone in battle who's killed, wounded, or missing. So they can no longer fight. Missing means that men desert, or maybe they're captured. And so when you hear casualties, a lot of people think casualties are those who died. It's killed, wounded, or missing. But it means you can't fight anymore. So Washington captured a wounded Jumonville. Now we're not sure. Washington would say Jumonville died after the fact, and you'll see why in a second why this story Washington would push. But what probably happened was they captured Washington, and Washington tried to interrogate Jumonville. Late August, sun's going down. You can imagine in the forest how gloomy and dark it was. They built a couple fires. There were the few French kind of tied up or off to the side because they'd been captured. I need a drink, sorry. And Jumonville is on his knees, hands tied behind his back, and Washington's interrogating him. What's the problem with this interrogation? He doesn't speak French. But he doesn't want to admit he can't. He's a gentleman. He doesn't want to admit this. So Washington is screaming at Jumonville because Jumonville's not answering him in English. Shockingly, he's answering in French. So Jumonville screamed back in French. Washington, yelling at him, and it's getting out of control. And one of the Mingos, one of the leading warriors that the English called Half King, is sitting behind with a war club. Imagine a stick with a polished rock tied to it. Good weapon. And it would be like just touch the enemy, show bravery, or a good weapon to hit. He's sitting with his club. No matter, he's just wearing nothing but maybe a loincloth, and that's it. They fought naked in the summer. Tan and naked's really good camouflage in the woods. It really is good. Now, some of you are nodding like, oh yeah, that's what I use. I don't want to know. But he's sitting there with this. He's in this war club, and he's watching Washington. He's watching Washington, and he's like, this is ridiculous. Because that's what he's thinking. We came here to get some booty. We came here to steal stuff. And Washington is losing control. Washington's screaming. It's clear that his men are upset about it. They're scared. So Half King decides to end the argument between Jumonville and Washington. Anybody want to guess how he ends this? So he takes his club and walks up behind Jumonville. And there's no warning, so we just imagine he just kind of came out of the darkness. And came without a warning and bang! Hits Jumonville in the back of the head.
Classic Half King.
Huh?
Classic.
Typical Half King. Blood goes everywhere. His skull splits apart. He falls down on the ground. Needless to say, pandemonium ensues. And then, as everyone's screaming, Jumonville's laying there, blood everywhere. Half King comes up, puts one foot on the skull where the split is, takes his hand and starts prying open the skull, pulls out the brain, which by the way is fatal for Jumonville, pulls it out and starts washing himself with the brain.
That's my Half King.
Washington has lost control. And so everyone's just going, "Ah!" running around. A bunch of the French escaped and go back to Duquesne and said Washington has just murdered. The English had just murdered our person who was there on a mission of peace. Washington started a war. Now, the war would have started anyways. So it's not saying, all of a sudden Washington out of nowhere said, I'm going to start a war. That will make me president of this new country in 35 years. No! What happened was he foolishly blundered into this. Now Washington realized one thing very quickly. Oh, am I in trouble? So they retreat to a nearby forest clearing. I think I wrote down a few things, but I just told you the story. Half King War. Okay, we got that, right? And he made a fort, and he called it Fort Necessity. You know you're in trouble if you call your fort Necessities. So at the bottom of a little valley, and they rolled down some trees and split them up, and this is a replica of the fort they made. Just as a round little stockade, as quick as possible. Now they forgot to put it near a water supply. Gee, I wonder if that'll be a problem. And quickly, the French and their French and their Huron allies surrounded it. And they're in hills, so they could just fire right down into the fort. It was just a panicky situation. And it didn't take long. Did not take long for Washington to realize, well, they started running out of ammunition, they started running out of, or men were starting to get hit. He knew it was a no-win situation. And Washington did, we had two choices, didn't he? If he fought to the death, he'll never become that English officer. That's science. And the other thing is, if he surrenders, so he's humiliated, isn't he? And he'll be blamed for this war that nobody, well, the French are kind of ready, but the English certainly aren't. He decides to surrender. Now, he surrendered with what's called conditions or terms. I think I typed a couple of these things down, but I started telling the story. Huh. Don't do that. Surrounded, Washington surrendered. Now, terms or conditions, this was very common in war, especially then. You know, why fight to the finish? We're lost. We lost. And so the French would allow, the British would surrender, the French would allow them to surrender, and then walk home. Just go home. We win. No one else has to die. Those are conditions. Unconditional surrender means there's no terms. The victor decides what happens. This rarely happened. This would become a big issue in future wars when wars are fought to the finish. Modern wars. But Washington surrendered. Here's the deal. So the French got him, and the French, who are thinking, remember, we're outnumbered. We nearly lost King George's War. So they gave him a piece of paper. On the piece of paper, they wrote things down, and they gave it to Washington. This is it. It's a copy of it, or that's a picture of it. Washington got it, goes, okay. I read. Signed it. That's Washington's signature right there. Signed it. What was the problem? Yeah, he had no idea what he was reading. He didn't want to admit he had no idea, so he acted like he did and agreed with it and signed it. And in it, he admitted, or he admitted, I guess is the only way to look at it, because it didn't happen, but he said that not only did he personally order the execution of Jumonville, who was on a mission of peace, but ultimately the order came from London, and the goal was to start a war. George Washington inadvertently started the French and Indian War. That would directly lead to the events that would, British victory, then rebellion, then the U.S., and George Washington, the first president. What a diabolical long-term plot by Washington. So Washington is humiliated, walked back, and now we have a war. What do we call this war? Oh, I think I typed out a couple things. You know that, right? The French and Indian War. Now, in this context, it means that the colonies, if I say the United States, I'm sorry, what's going to become the United States, they're fighting the French and the American Indians. Because the French have many more allies. But that's it, the French and Indian War. In Europe, it's going to be called the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War. And you notice this one's going to start 2 years later. Most of the other wars started, especially the bigger ones, started in Europe. Like from the War of Austrian Succession or the Spanish Succession. This one, it started right here. Right there, Fort Duquesne. Washington went back, and now the British, realizing that, okay, we're going to have to stop the French right away. They would send, by the way, these are British cities, English, that's actually the Scottish flag, but just go with me on that. they would send an experienced general, William Braddock. Braddock had fought in the War of the Austrian Succession, and he knew how Europeans fought. I mean, Britain sent somebody very, very experienced, and a regiment of 1,000 men, but Washington got a second chance. Braddock had Washington as his aide-de-camp or adjutant. So Washington could go back because he had been there before. And they followed Washington's route. This red line shows the main line of Braddock's march. And a few hundred militia, 1,000 British infantry, and they begin to march towards the French and their Huron allies. And one thing we had to get to that. Now, Braddock thought he knew how to fight. He thought the colonials were dumb hicks who didn't know anything. That's very common. You know, the mother country looks at the colonists and say, you people don't know anything or you wouldn't be colonists. Here's a picture of a Huron. Those were the French allies. And the French fought the way the Hurons did because there weren't near as many French. And we would call these tactics in the next century, it started in Spain in the first decade of the 19th century, guerrilla fighting. Does anyone know what guerrilla fighting is? It's not gorilla. It's Spanish, guerrilla. Yeah.
Just small attacks on their main force and then retreat and attack again. And it just continues until the main force is destroyed.
Or at least disrupted where they just say we're going home. And yeah, so a smaller, the smaller, less powerful army uses ambush, stealth, hide with the population, hit and run attacks, hit supply lines, exactly. With the whole idea they pull back and pull back when any large units come. And imagine 1,500 men and supplies on that. Remember that road Washington made? How big is that road? So how long is that line of men?
Like 1 million miles.
It's a couple miles long. It's a couple miles. And so you can imagine, as they got closer, this is going to be ambush hell. Heavily wooded area, come pouring out of the woods, run back into the woods so the British can't form. And, oh, one more thing. If you look at a Huron, what would you call that haircut?
Mohawk.
You ever heard the term Mohawk? The Mohawks didn't wear their hair like that. The Huron did. The Mohawks wore their hair significantly different. Now let's not copy other notes. What do we... Oh, okay. Is this from... Oh, from this. And let me show you how the Mohawks wore... This will hurt a little bit.
Okay.
But it's worth it for the class, right?
Okay.
Are you with me on that? No one has a problem with the sacrifice?
Good. Okay.
The Huron didn't have hair here. Huron had no hair here. No. So they had hair on here, no hair on top. And how they did that is when you would reach adulthood, so 14 years old, 15 years old, they'd come up behind you, be held down, grab the hair, and rip it out. Yeah, I know. Fun, huh? If you can take the pain, then you're an adult.
Nice.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Oh, this is getting messy. We'll go to Mr. Larson. And
Perfect.
and if you pull out hair like that, what's it going to lead, or what's going to go with the hair?
Scalp.
Yeah, all the way down to this bone. It's going to pull it all out, so the hair won't grow back. And so you see pictures of Mohawks. A lot of times they draw this nice, smooth skull. Oh, it's just kind of bumpy scar. But you're an adult. Why do they call them Mohawks today in the United States?
Those are racist.
There's an element of racism there, but that's not. World War II. Paratroopers were taught, they're going to land behind lines, they're going to use guerrilla tactics, and they thought they were going to attack like American Indians. And this was the time of the Western movies, and that's what they thought they would attack like. And so they would train for that. They put black on the cover, for camouflage, and they try to do it like as they saw war paint from the movies that were really popular at the time. When they jump out of the plane, what would they yell? Geronimo, and that came from movies. And there was a very popular movie at that time called All Quiet Along the Mohawk River, but Mohawk. And so they start to cut their hair as what they thought was American Indian style. And so what did they do? We'll call it Mohawks from the movies. That's how come we got that. And yes, there's a racist element, but they're also trying to think we're going to fight like it. So it's always more complex. On that happy note, everybody come back with a real Mohawk.
Try.
I'll give you 3 points extra credit.
3 points.
I don't know. We'll get 4 if we got a deal.
4.
Alright. Classic torch though. Maybe they'll
Have a good day. Right when you find work, hang by your thumb.
So cool. I think he makes such a good presentation.